welcome to an interview for VIT Today. We have with us one of the most renowned journalists of our country, Mr. Shekhar Gupta. Sirs, the founder of ThePrint and also writes a column for the Business Standard. He was also the chairman of India Today Group, and he was one of the most watched faces on television and hosted the show Walk the Talk for NDTV. And we're extremely glad to have you on the show today, sir. I'm humbled to have you on the show. Starting off with the questions, Sujana.
So we wanted to start the interview by exploring your transition from as a vice chairman of India Today to the founder of ThePrint. So we would want to know what was the difference like, what was the approach like, and why the transition. So if you could elaborate a little onto it.
Well, I think transition from India Today is a little bit of a misnomer because I was in India Today for a very short time. Before that, I was with Indian Express for 19 years, both as editor-in-chief and for most of that tenure also as the company's CEO. So I had the twin responsibility. Then I joined India Today in that capacity, but did not stay there, not for more than a few months. So I think the more important thing is, why did I leave the Indian Express? And the answer is that I had done the same thing for a very long time, and I wanted a little more stress in life because there is nothing more. There is, in a way, I'm contradicting myself, but there is nothing more stressful than boredom. So when you're doing the same thing over and over again, and then you realize that there isn't that much more to do in this place, then you go out and you want to take a new panga. So, and I thought if I didn't do it then I'll get too old to do any of this. So that's the reason I left. We tried something at India Today. We thought we'll work there. But I think soon enough, I realized that what I wanted by way of a change and a challenge was not another job, but I wanted to build something of my own. And that's how then ThePrint came.
Right, sir. So following up on that, online news media outlets like ThePrint are still a recent concept in our country, right? In the sense that they've started coming up more recently in the decade than before, compared to old media groups like or the news groups like the Times, etc. Considering that these old media houses still have a considerable share in the distribution of news and the network in the country, how do you see the rise of online newspapers and online news media in the next coming decade? And do you think that this is what the future of news and information looks like?
Well, increasingly now you find that people are reading online. People are reading off the phone. If I look at our audience, about 92% of our audience is reading us or watching us off the phone. So that's a big change, and that's a change nobody can deny. So if you look at globally, if you look at the biggest print publications, look at the Financial Times of London, see the New York Times, Washington Post, Wall Street Journal, and I'm sure in other European languages also, which I don't follow so much, the bulk of their readership is now coming online, and the bulk of their revenue is coming online, because they've all gone behind paywalls, and they insist that you pay. And people are paying because people also need good content. So I think it will be some time before we in India start paying that much. And in India, there's a peculiar problem. And that problem is that the audiences in India are very spoiled because we are given our newspapers too cheap. So the Times of India will give you a 48-page newspaper for 4 rupees, and with that they might give you a thermos flask, or they might give you something, right? If you sell that paper in Raddi, you will recover 2 rupees or 2 rupees 50 paisa. So basically a newspaper is costing you nothing. Whereas if you buy the Financial Times of London of the same size, you will pay £1. That is 100 rupees. Now you might say, oh, those guys are making a lot of money. They are not. Because both the Financial Times and the Times of India, their basic raw material is newsprint. And they are buying their newsprint at the same price, because newsprint is a global commodity. It has the same price. In fact, when you buy it in India, you even pay duty on it, because Government of India has put customs duty on newsprint, and all our good quality newsprint is imported. So this business model is now broken. This business model was built around the idea that you give your paper or your TV channel almost free to the audience and then load all that cost on the advertiser. So advertiser will have to pay that much more to buy space there. I think that model in India is now being challenged. And as we come out of COVID, more and more people will realize that they did not really have to buy these newspapers like that. So they will switch to digital. And when they switch to digital, then the advertisers will say that, look, I don't have to pay so much for this advertising. So there's going to be a big commotion, and I think this commotion will be stronger in India because in the Western world, which we compare ourselves with because those are democracies, their people are already used to paying a lot more for their newspapers.
Right. So also when you're talking of this change that's going to happen, that people are going to be more accustomed to reading news online. So a very large part of Indian population that follows news is coming from rural areas where probably the means of accessing digital news is not there. So how do you think that transition is going to happen? Or as someone who is into this into making news available online, how do you think you can reach out to these people in rural areas so that they are also updated with correct and authentic information?
Well, first of all, it's wrong to believe that rural areas are not well connected. Rural areas are not very well connected. You want to see how well connected they are? See how many WhatsApp downloads are there in India, or see how many TikTok downloads were there in India in such a short time. And TikTok was essentially a small town rural medium. So rural India is very well connected. In fact, when we travel during the elections, we'll find, because these are, you may or may not like the Chinese, but the Chinese make very cheap smartphones. So a lot of people have smartphones and a lot of people are well connected, and that connectivity is now increasing. Now, the important thing is that people like us, for us to reach out to those audiences, we have to now start working in Indian languages. I don't use vernacular. That is banned in my newsrooms because that is pejorative and judgmental. So Indian languages. You come from Assam, I presume, right? So I know my Boras and Bogoras. I lived in Assam for 3 years. So say in Assam, I know that I have to know that if I have to be read in Assam, rural Assam, then I have to publish in Assamese. But if I want to be read in Karimganj, in Silchar, etc., that's in Kachar, which is also a part of Assam, I have to publish in Bengali. So, yeah, so those are things that we'll have to learn. But remember that bulk of the advertising revenues will still come to English. And then they will come to Hindi because that is the way, that is the unfair way in which the life is, in which the markets are structured in India. Because advertisers think that people, they put value to demographics. So they think that the top of the demographic pyramid are those who work in English. The second rung is those who work in Hindi. And then you go on to others. So I think this will be, these sort of tectonic plates will keep moving. But smart people will publish in many languages. See, the Supreme Court of India now is using a software to translate all its judgments into 9 languages simultaneously. So when the old and conservative Supreme Court of India also does such a thing, then we will all also have to do this.
Right, sir. So you've interviewed multiple people over a long career of like couple of decades, and you also hosted that very famous TV show Walk the Talk, which I think most of us remember from our childhood. So could you probably give us a story or probably an instance from one of these very famous interviews that you took? I'm pretty sure you've interviewed almost every one of the most of the prime ministers in the last 20 years. So could you probably share something with our viewers and us? A story or something that stuck with you during one of these interviews?
Well, I'm asked that question many times. And what I do is that almost each time I mention a different interview. because there are so many, it's impossible to put one on the top or one as the most interesting. And also the context keeps changing from time to time. Also, remember that even in my life, if I have to mention the same interview all the time, that will get very boring. I'll be repeating the same thing. So because of the context, say national politics in our society today, I would say the most interesting for me and among the most memorable, because politicians will come and go, sportsmen will come and go. Tendulkar has gone, Virat Kohli's come, Virat Kohli will go. Sorry if there are any fans there, but someone else will come, right? But there are people who then remain forever and who are irreplaceable. So one of those was Ustad Bismillah Khan, who was a Bharat Ratna, and I recorded a walk the talk with him when he was in his 90s, I think just a couple of years before he died, and he could not even get up. So he spoke from his bed or his khatia, just a charpoy with no mattress on it, and he had his shanai on his side because he always slept with it. And we talked, and among the many things he said, I asked him, what did he say? Because Maulvis in Iran had then said that music is haram for Muslims. And so his response was that if music is haram for Muslims, so when you climb the minaret of a mosque, do you say, Are aa namaz karne ke liye? You have to say it in a muezzin's call, has to be in a musical rhythm. So he said, without music, even God will not respond to you. And similarly, I asked him, why did you go to Pakistan? Because I know that there was an offer to him to come to Pakistan by the founders of Pakistan. And he said, Pakistan jate to Banaras kahan se aata? Hamara to Banaras hai. So then I asked him about Banaras and the Hindu-Muslim issue. And he said, look, I do music. I do Bhairavi. I love Bhairavi. He said, but how do you do Bhairavi, Rag Bhairavi, without praying to Shiva first? So you first need the blessings of Lord Shiva to do Rag Bhairavi. So he said, Hindus told me I can't come to the temple because I'm a Muslim. There's a Shiva temple close by. So I said, ठीक है, मुझे नहीं आने दोगे, तो मैं मंदिर के पीछे जाऊंगा. So he said he started going behind the temple and touching the wall because he knows that the other side of the wall, Lord Shiva is resting. So he said, Lord Shiva can see behind the wall also. So you don't let me come inside the temple, I'll do it from outside the temple. And he's somebody who's a very devout Muslim, etc., etc. So I just thought that was such a spirit of India that I share it, I reshare it often. And I find every time I do it, it still gets seen a lot. So I would say that in today's context, I wish we had him around and we had more people like him around.
Right, sir. So that was a very, I would say, authentic reply. And authenticity is something that we want to come to. And so when we're talking of celebrities in India, in the current scenario, they have been questioned time and again as to why they don't give a political opinion or a social opinion. Like, why don't they ever voice about things that are prevalent in society that everybody else is talking about, and they never use their platforms to advocate for something that is probably important. So you've interviewed multiple of them, and you have been on the side where you try to take out these opinions out of them. So why do you think it is this culture in India where celebrities refrain from making any comments, whereas in countries like USA, celebrities openly call out their governments and openly condemn if they need to? So why do you think that exists here?
Well, they give many reasons. So first, I don't agree with them, but I will tell you the reasons they give. The first reason they give is, oh, we are very vulnerable, we get attacked. Where do they get attacked? On social media first. So Amir Khan says something, immediately there is pressure, so Snapdeal has to give up on Amir Khan. So Amir Khan loses his sponsorship. Now, okay, that's one. Second thing is, oh, the government will go after me. Government will raid me for tax. All right, those things also happen. Third is somebody will throw stones at me, I'll be going out. Okay, that also happens. the same people will then say, you journalists, you have to really stand up for truth. You must speak out. Now, don't we get trolled on social media? Don't our advertisers get attacked for not advertising with some people because you disagree with them? Don't we get rated by the government or the tax department or whatever? Don't we have, don't we face violence? And we don't even have so much resources, and we are not so famous. So I think essentially in India, celebrities don't do it because they are cowards. Most of India's celebrities are cowards. They are chicken, and they are, most of them are beneath contempt. And if they say that, oh, but I have so many problems. Now, when Amir Khan was pushed around and Snapdeal dropped Amir Khan, if India's top 20 stars had said, or an association of India stars had said, none of us will now be Snapdeal's brand ambassador because they dropped a brand ambassador for the wrong reasons, then from then on, no brand would have done it. But then others didn't do it because they are cowardly. What else do you call it? This is cowardly. So that's one. Second thing is that India has a Darbari culture, which comes right from, not just from Mughal times, but even before that, where artists, performers, intellectuals, even astrologers, musicians, they all survived on the Darbar's patronage, on the palace's patronage. So you sang very well, you were Raja Tansen, so Akbar threw something at you, right? A string of pearls or something. Similarly, when we became independent, then Padma Awards, houses in Delhi, foreign visits, dance troupes going overseas, private sector in India and consumers of Indian art and culture never built a system of patronage for good voices. And that is what became a problem. Then at some point, you see, Indian painters began to make a lot of money. That's why some of the painters started to speak out. M.F. Hussain is a very good example, because they became independent and they were not dependent on the state. But too many of our musicians, too many of our dancers, too many others are still very dependent on the states. And film stars, see, we are a rare country among democracies where government has film awards, right? And still every film star wants government film awards. Why? Because all other awards, cinema awards, are fixed. I said, having run screen awards for the Express Group for 13 years and having struggled to keep them straight. Now I would say, I used to go to Amir Khan and ask him, why doesn't he come for film awards? And he will say, they are all fixed. I will come for yours when you can guarantee to me they are not fixed. And I said, I make sure that I never interfere with the jury, etc., etc. But we tried. But I could never go to him and say, and I say to him that even with my trying for so many years, they were 100% clean. They were 90% clean, but 10% something or the other happened. So sometime, finally I got so fed up that I said, even if something has to be done because of a sponsor or because of the TV channel which is showing this, I will give what is called as an audience choice award, right? You can show it to your mom and she'll be very happy that you got an award. But that award will look different from our other awards. So if we had one kind of statuette for screen awards, for these audience choice Faltu awards, we created a different kind of statuette. So that was my compromise. Now, because our film star system is so loaded and so dishonest, that it weakens them everywhere.
Right, sir. So, moving on to a little different issue, you've spoken about in your show Cut the Clutter about you were following elections when you were a young journalist, and you've followed multiple elections, and given us a lot of stories about them. Could you probably share one more election that kept you on the edge till the very end? Yeah, I remember one of the stories you told us about Mr. Vajpayee's election and about the election Mr. Sindhya fought 2 decades back, if I'm not wrong. Could you probably give us a story of one of the campaigns you followed from the start and you were on your toes till the very end?
Well, Mr. Sindhya's campaign was 35 years ago. in 1984 December. That is the campaign which I read wrong, because we just thought that, who can defeat Mr. Vajpayee? Because Mr. Vajpayee was so popular, and this was a long time before he became prime minister, because he was so friendly, he was so accessible, he was a wonderful human being. And also, this became Raja or Rang Ki Ladai, because Madhavrao Sindhia was the ruler of Gwalior. Atal Bihari Vajpayee was from a very poor family in Gwalior, so much so that he only got his college education because Madhavrao Sindhia's father had given him a scholarship. Because he said, there's this promising kid from a poor family in Gwalior, I'm giving him a scholarship. So we thought king versus the commoner has to win. But we were very wrong, because that was the Rajiv Gandhi way. So that was one. But I think the most interesting elections are the ones that are the closest. So 2004 national election, where we saw that with each phase of the election, the mood was shifting. In the first phase, you thought that Vajpayee was coming back with very good number. By second phase, it was tiring a bit. By third or fourth phase, you could begin to see trouble. You could begin to sense trouble, because somehow voter was getting tired. So those are interesting. But I think I learned most of all from covering 2 elections in Bihar. I think the year was 2005, when Bihar had 2 elections, because the first was inconclusive. So the government couldn't be formed. There was a second election later that year when Nitish came to power with a full majority. And that's where we finally came to the conclusion that India was changing. That's when I began using increasingly the expression aspirational India, and that India was changing, and also the metaphor I use for elections, writings on the wall, that sort of got affirmed fully for the first time in those 2 Bihar elections. And since then, we have traveled in every Bihar election, because with all the problems that the state has, it is the most politicized, and everybody in Bihar is a political pundit, smarter than any pundit you can find in the Press Club of India.
Right, sir. So, taking this interview a bit into, we wanted to explore a couple of issues or discuss topics that are usually brought up when we talk about journalism. And starting with, I think, the topic that usually most spoken of is censorship. So, we wanted to understand your take on censorship. We have seen the very extreme of censorship back in the emergency, when news media was completely controlled by the government, as opposed to now, when we feel that there's a censorship there, but we still know that there's no active censorship, but people are still withholding information from us. And sometimes it's obvious when you see which channel you're watching, right? So what is your take on this fundamental issue of freedom of information and journalism in our country?
See, first of all, don't let some channels who are doing whatever they are doing, don't make them judge you Indian journalists, because those channels are not doing journalism. Those channels are doing entertainment. So you want to be entertained, you can go to those channels. But you also know, and everybody knows, that they are not giving you the news. So go there for either because you agree with them and you think, fantastic, maar diya, fit kar diya isko aaj. Or you go there because you just want to be amused. So don't go to them for news. Of the rest, there are pressures from the government. There are always pressures from the government, but pressures from this government are much greater. That there is no doubt about. Because politicians, as film stars, cricket stars, they've all learned that one of the biggest levers they can use against journalists is access. So if you write a line that such and such film star doesn't like about you, then that film star will never speak with you. Then what will you do if you're a film journalist? Cricket, the same thing will happen. If you say something about a cricketer that the cricketer doesn't like, and the cricketer blackballs you, you've had it. Because today, if you're covering cricket and Virat Kohli isn't speaking with you and decides not to speak with you, you are finished. So people use the star system, and that lesson now politicians have also learned. So Mr. Modi also will only speak every time he gives interviews before an election or something. you know who he will give interviews to, and you know who he will not give interviews to. So you also, if you want to be free, besides the fact that you might get harassed or etc., those things also happen. But first of all, there is self-denial, because you know that you will be cut out of access. So that is at the minimum level that you face. But you have to then be strong enough to handle it. The other thing is that the worst censorship is self-censorship. And too many are doing it because they think it's convenient. And also when they hold these big events, some summit, some conclave, some this and that, they want prime minister and other ministers to come there, because without that, the sponsors are not happy. And then that leverage also is with the government now, that if I'm not happy with what you're doing, I will stop coming for your event. See what happened with the Times of India group. The BJP government was unhappy with their coverage of the Uttar Pradesh elections, which the BJP won ultimately, because some of the ET coverage had indicated that BJP may not win. They refused to come for their annual event. And the main reporter who had fronted the paper's coverage had to leave. And the papers completely changed their view and their way. And again, Prime Minister and the rest started going for their events. So these are problems today that you face.
Right, sir. And so picking on the same note, it's definitely these people who are using their power to probably not encourage certain news houses. But sir, a lot of force and a lot of weightage is also given to sponsors or people who are funding these news houses, because they are the ones who are controlling it. And clearly a news house cannot be run on crowdfunding. That's not at all sufficient. So when we have these people behind who are giving money, who are having a good amount of stake into it, how does a journalist ever be free of censorship and be free to write whatever they want, and also have the surety that they will be protected in that environment? And just because they have written something that might not please people, they may not be laid off.
See, first of all, the only people who can do it is people like you. It is the readers and viewers. Because there is volume. Because instead of a sponsor giving us 10 lakhs or 1 crore, 10 lakh people can give us 10 rupees each. And that's 1 crore. The second thing is there is safety in numbers. So if a sponsor gives us 10 lakhs for some show or whatever, somebody can go after the sponsor. But if 10 lakh people give us 10 rupees each, nobody can go after 10 lakh people. So it doesn't even have to be 10 lakh. If 1 lakh people give us 1,000 rupees each, then it's a very sound model for free journalism, free media. That's why it is, once citizens of our country realize, they know it, but they have to become more conscious, and we keep saying it again and again, that a free media, free, independent, honest media is very important for them. It plays an important role in their lives. Then they will see the value in paying for it. And they don't have to pay very much for it. In fact, they have to pay much less than what they pay for the newspaper in the morning. Except that, unlike the newspaper, they cannot sell raddi at the end of the week.
Right, sir. So concluding this line of questioning on censorship, with the rise of technology and online newspapers, we also have the rise of WhatsApp forwards and the rise of fake Twitter accounts, which is also the other side of the coin when it comes to information sharing, right? So, and this has become quite dangerous in the sense that we're not able to differentiate between if what my uncle sent me is actually news or is it something else, right? Because people are sending texts like there were martial artists at Galwan Valley when there was a fight at LSE, and absurd things like that, and people are actually believing it. So, as a person who's been in this profession for this long, how do you think somebody can tackle such new innovative ways of giving misinformation?
I think you've given me an idea. I should now create a WhatsApp forward that actually when the going got really tough, Narendra Modi ji decided to paradrop Salman Khan there. And he went and finished all the Chinese, right? You see, you have to use your brains. And most people don't use their brains. Most people who believe these things don't use their brains they, because their brains instinctively believe what they want to believe. So, so that is the problem. So don't suspend your rational judgment. That is the first thing. Second, anonymous Twitter accounts. I have a public position. In fact, I tweeted yesterday also that people should not be speaking from anonymous handles, because one, anonymity brings out the worst in human beings. And second, as any citizen has his or her rights under the law, whether it's the right of defamation, whether it's the right to prevent sexual harassment. We all have a blackmail, we all have our rights. But once you have an anonymous handle, how do you enforce your rights as a citizen? So if somebody says anonymity is my right because of freedom of expression, then as a citizen or as a victim of that freedom of expression, what is the legal recourse to you if the other person is anonymous? So anonymity is wrong. I don't think it's going to go on forever. In fact, yesterday I said on Twitter that somebody has to now wring Twitter's neck and stop this anonymous handle business. WhatsApp forwards, I think people just have to learn in the course of time.
Right. So we're running a little short of time, so the call might get cut. However, you can rejoin the same link, but we'll continue with the normal course.
No, let's finish it. Now my light is fading because I have to record. Huh?
Sure, sure, sir. So on a concluding note, we wanted to know what your advice would be to end this sort of fake news from spreading. First of all, as youth, what can we practice so that we make sure that we're not reposting the wrong things? And sir, an overall message as to how we can be more responsible citizens on the net and in general.
See, first of all of us, we understand. See, I say in journalism, I say in my newsroom that everything, particularly figures, you can't say, oh, but I have data. But data must also stand the test of reasonableness. When somebody said 1,76,000 crore 2G scam, oh, ban gaya. Everybody said 1,76,000 crore. It just became a bhedchal or herd mentality. The fact is that, and I used to raise that question then, that in 2007, when the scam took place, 1,76,000 crores was $2 billion more than all of India's defense budget. So could the value of this much spectrum be $2 billion more than even all of India's defense budget, Army, Navy, Air Force, Coast Guard, everything? It doesn't stand to reason. So when you see these things, first of all, never switch off the bullshit detector in your heads. It should always be on, because we are being bombarded with bullshit all the time. Second, before you share, check. Now there are many organizations, including ThePrint, which does fake news check, but that takes time. But when you go to Google, check whatever you are seeing with something authentic. For example, you see something on coronavirus, this medicine works. Go to Google, but don't just go to Google and pick up the first thing that comes up. That first thing must be the biggest myth because everybody is picking it up. Go to a good website like webmd.com, one of those places, and then see what are they saying. Or go to National Institute of Health of America or ICMR in India. ICMR website is not that user friendly, but do some of that. So just a little bit of work. Ask Auntie Google. I won't say Uncle Google because I'll have to be correct in terms of gender.
Right, sir. So I think with that, we come to the conclusion of this interview. We're really glad you gave time to us and spoke to the students of our university. And I wanted to mention one thing, that I think ThePrint was one of the first news organizations that actually took the effort to come to universities and conduct, I think, I forgot, Democracy Wall.
Democracy Wall.
Democracy Wall. And and that was... We were really glad to see that people were reaching out to our university and educating us.
Dia Mirza come to
Right, yeah.
Yes, sir.
Meenakshi
And so
Lekhi,
we were
Dia
there in the
Mirza.
actually
we were there in the audience, and it did leave a very, very huge impact onto us. And right from that day, we have, I think, never stopped
Yeah,
riding
it
that
was one of the
riding
day,
the
it was
stride of wave.
we
it
are
was that when
starting
we
something
started.
we are starting something for you people, specifically for students. We are starting in a week or so, we are starting a new property called Campus Voice. So
Right,
we'll
sir.
invite opinion
Amazing.
articles from students, genuine students, and every week we'll have first, second, third prizes, and these will be good prizes, but quite a bit and decent prizes. So you people all write and contribute,
Sure, sir.
because all of you should have a
Thank
voice.
you.